Can you hear that? It's as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. I fear something terrible might have been threatened. It's almost as if, having been made to sit through 3 50 Shades films, millions of film critics and reluctant partners are being threatened with a spin-off starring Rita Ora's character. She's just down in my notes as pop star who can't act, but I'm sure she has a name and motivations and a reason to exist, but I'll be damned if I can tell you what it is. Anyway, until that dark, terrible time, I guess I should tell you about 50 Shades Freed, which is exactly how I felt walking out of my screening. So, an unspecified amount of time after 50 Shades Episode 2, The Boredom Strikes Back, 2 people with no chemistry or interest in trying to act have gotten married and are bumbling around the house waiting for the plot to happen, like some demented spin-off of The Only Way is Chelsea Shore. I mean, there is a plot of sorts, but it doesn't happen until about an hour into this mercifully shortened 93-minute film, and since the cast don't seem to care about it, then I don't see why I should. I mean, it's a shame, as despite itself, it could have been a pretty influential film for the #MeToo movement, detailing a woman who was harassed by her employer but finding it difficult to get justice when people seem unsure of who to believe. There's an absence of physical or digital evidence either way, and he strongly proclaims that in fact she is the guilty party. I mean, that's one of the plot threads that this film seems to look at for about 30 seconds before discarding it in favour of trying to get Dakota Johnson to go topless again. A weird fixation for such a female-focused film to have, but then again, I'm not in the target audience. Also, Christian Grey is still a terrifying, controlling monster who has undergone no significant character development and needs some serious counselling and a restraining order. In either order, I'm not fussy. The weird thing is that this is still shot like a real film. Instead of embracing its inner trash, director James Foley, House of Cards, has decided instead to shoot an incredibly glossy advert for yachts, buying new houses, and driving Audis. Seriously, one of the most emotionally detailed performances is given by a product placement Audi, which is why from now on I will only ever buy Nissan. And since legendary composer Danny Elfman, Batman, Men in Black, everything Tim Burton has ever done, still hasn't quite paid off that flat screen TV, the music is really good as well. But it's like getting out the fine china after the Titanic has hit the iceberg. It's very nice in its own right, but it's not really doing anything to make the overall situation better in any way, shape or form. Because whilst these films have always been terribly written, plotted, paced, acted, had no tension or conflict, starred people with no chemistry or interest in each other, and took themselves way too seriously, now they just look old-fashioned. In a world where abuse against women is finally being discussed in depth, it's nearly impossible to disassociate the film's romantic fantasy about a controlling wealthy man and his unbalanced relationship with a young female subordinate from the current discourse about why such a setup is inherently problematic. The film takes a position that as long as behaviour is legal and consensual, it's also morally fine. It's a stance that feels particularly anachronistic in the midst of productive national conversations about consent and abuse of power that have come with the current reckoning. In other words, what was once merely in bad taste is now leaving a bad taste in people's mouths and seems almost overnight to have become a passé. Like those millennials discovering how creepy old school James Bond could be, although he's a saint compared to Book Bond, I promise you. Sorry, I got distracted by talking about something vaguely interesting, unlike this film which has nothing interesting to say or do. No plot point or character to resonate with or even to remember in about an hour's time. Arguably the worst trilogy in film history has drawn to a close with a whimper and a muttered good riddance. None of the characters have evolved or adapted. I'm certain that someone somewhere, hopefully far away from all pointy objects, thinks that calling the villain, for want of a better word, Hyde, is very, very clever. But it did nothing for me, given that he gets maybe 4 minutes of screen time and is such a wasted opportunity of what could have been an interesting film. But if this plotline wanted to be an interesting film, it wouldn't have been in this. But nobody was interested in this film. Not the makers, or the stars, or the people who paid to advertise it. Hell, even the audience doesn't seem to have been interested in it, based on my half-empty opening night screening. But it's made $1 billion on less than $150 million, so I'm willing to bet the money men are very interested in that flaming spin-off. But until that great and glorious day, it's over and done, and aside from my bottom 10 list, I will never think about this franchise again, ever. Fantastic. But what do you guys think? And what is the worst trilogy in film history? Comment below, let me know. I'm Daniel, it's been a dunking. If you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe.